Do you work for the Catholic Church? Do you fear losing your faith because of your work environment? Or do you wonder how you can maintain a high level of integrity throughout both your personal and work life? This is the podcast for you.
Welcome to Serious Catholic Leadership, a place where you can come for clear answers and straightforward advice on all topics related to working for the Catholic Church. No fluff stuff. I'm Zach Morgan, and today I'm joined with my co-host Tom Timmons, and we're going to be tackling the topic of duplicity. No matter where you work, there will be duplicity. However, it is exaggerated when you work for the church because we pursue a holy purpose, but we are still human. That means we are still flawed, and we bring those flaws to work with us, and those flaws can start to define the efficacy of our work, and that becomes a problem if we don't figure out kind of how to temper that. So, Tom, when we talk about tempering the baggage that we bring, to the workplace, I think that there's a lot for us to consider.
Sure. Yeah. And duplicity is really it's almost a buzzword, I think, in the church today. But there's so much to it that it needs to be talked about, and we need to fight it when all possible. When I started working for the Catholic Church after graduating college, I was met very quickly with a very abrupt, almost bold statement that was, took me back a little bit. And it said, my boss had said to me, "Hey, welcome to working for the Catholic Church. You're either going to, love it, or you're going to lose your faith." And I thought, oh boy, wow, like, is she serious? Like, am I lose my what? Like, the church is great. What do you mean lose my faith? And as I thought more about that statement leading up to this conversation today, I thought, well, you know what? She was being honest, and it actually gave me an awareness about what was around me, and actually kind of almost protected me from being scandalized, because I had that heightened awareness of, okay, just because I'm working in the church doesn't mean it's perfect. And I think, oftentimes in working in the church, I think it's often a good practice to go back to the foundings, right? To go back to Christ and the founding of the church. And when you do that and you think of duplicity, you're like, okay, he founded the church with a bunch of sailors, fishermen, and these were rough, tough guys. And, you think of, Judas, who betrayed him. You're like, okay, this is the founding of the church. And if that's the founding, well, who are we to think that it's all roses today?
Exactly.
It's important to have the heightened awareness of duplicity, but then at the same time be protected against it and fight against it as much as possible. And, how do we do that on an institutional level?
Yeah. Well, when we consider that the work of the institution, like our work, it contributes to the goals of the institution. So when we look at our relationship then as an institution with other institutions, when we work for the church, or when we have a nonprofit that has very specific ethical stances, we have to be careful, because it's very easy to tie ourselves into other organizations because maybe they can help bring in some extra money, or maybe they can help increase membership or participation. But do those other organizations, those other institutions, hold to the same values that our institution is really fighting for? And when we have duplicity on that level, when as an institution, ultimately we become our message becomes a lot less authentic, because it looks like we're willing to sell out what we truly believe is an ethical concern or a moral problem for the convenience of some extra money or some extra publicity or some extra attention. They say no
Hmm.
publicity is bad publicity. No, with us, that's not true. With us, it really is. Like you don't want scandal. And one of the easiest ways to avoid scandal on an institutional level is to ensure that the relationships you have with other institutions that are working relationships where you are working off of the productivity of the other, that you're partnering with institutions who hold the same moral ethical standards that you do. When you
Hmm.
do that, when you partner yourself with others who are hold those same standards, that duplicity, the opportunity for that duplicity diminishes.
Hmm.
And then, once we look at it on the institutional level, what are our relationships like with other organizations? Once we get that kind of cleared up, if we're looking at sort of a top-down approach to duplicity, are our relationships with other organizations good relationships with good organizations? Then we can turn around and look at our own organization then, and the top level of our own organization is going to be on that management level. So Tom, like when we talk about good management that erases kind of the or not erases but at least diminishes the opportunity for duplicity, what are the type of management styles that you're looking for in that?
Right. So if I'm a manager, first and foremost, uh, you you want to have a high level of personal integrity as a manager, as somebody overseeing a department staff, um, and you want to embrace. I think when you look at the gospel, right, and correlate that to management, embracing a servant leadership is extremely important, right? That's what Christ came to serve. So when you're embracing that within your management and really looking to serve others and not serve yourself and your own pockets or or your ego or anything else like that. And I think we find that a lot in the church that there's oftentimes that you do have great organizations, but at the end of the day, it's about the money, or great organizations, and at the end of the day, it's about the ego. And it's really hard because we have to always remind ourselves, okay, we're here to serve one master, that's Christ and His church, it's not to serve this person or this personality or ourselves. And I think when you really get down to it, by serving at by leading as a servant and leading with integrity, you kind of start to build up organizational trust, both with your
Yeah.
employees, both with parishioners, benefactors,
Hmm.
and that's key because as you had said, Zach, when you work with even other organizations, and if they don't share that same mission, not necessarily even if they're Catholic or not, but if they have a completely different view on reality, on the world, and it's contrary to the teachings of the faith, then and you're doing business with that company, that lawyer, that consultant, what does that then say to your supporters, your parishioners, that hey, we profess one thing, but at the end of the day, we're happy to support something that doesn't,
Yeah.
and we're happy to take the money that you've given us and give it to that, and then all of a sudden it just breaks down the organization uh, because it's just sending a clear message of we're duplicitous and we're not genuine. And that really, I think, brings us to the next point of like, okay, how do you then, how are you then most genuine in an organization? How do you embrace a real genuine spirit of work? Even and what does that really mean? What does that look like?
Yeah. And I think when we remember that we a lot of times we think of working for the church as just a job. But the reality is that there's no position in the church that is just a job. Who we are is always going to be a part of that. And when who we are brings any type of scandal to or contrary or openly contradictory to the precepts of the faith or the teaching of the church, we are bringing along with that a a personal truth that we try to put over what the institution says is the truth. It's hard in the church because we are flawed people who are brought in to do work for a greater cause. And that public scandal seeps in when our managers, and we'll go back to management for just a minute. Managers need to do a really good job when they're interviewing and talking to potential employees to make sure that they understand that there's a morality clause in working for the church. And it's not just because we're going to make sure that you toe the line or we're going to make sure that but it's to protect the organization from those opportunities of having duplicitous agents. Because when parishioners come to us, when the lost come to us, when other organizations come to the church or to Catholic nonprofits, they are anticipating a certain response. And that's one that is uniquely Catholic and upholds the ethical and moral values of the church. When we hire agents to work for us, when we hire employees who really don't uphold the tenets of the faith in their own personal life, with social media now, our lives are on display. So when I say I work for a Catholic institution or I work for a Catholic organization or I work for the church itself, there is sort of an unsaid or unstated reality that I work for them because I agree with their mission. It goes unsaid because it's assumed, even though you as an individual employee may not feel that way. But the reality is, when a individual meets another individual who says, "I work for the church," immediately comes to mind the person who asks the question, "Where do you work?" And you say, "For the church." That, oh, well, then you must hold to the truths that the Catholic Church professes. And so when we have these, when we employ people to work for us who really don't hold to the precepts of the faith, or we bring in 1099 employees, contractors who don't really uphold the precepts of the faith, we are bringing in an open dialogue for duplicity. And if we are trying to diminish that, then we simply have to be more thorough with who we hire and who we bring in, and that becomes kind of a taboo topic because we're basically saying, someone could be fully qualified to work here. They have the education, they have the experience, but we're not going to hire them because of the way they live their personal life. Well, for the church, yes, because part of the requirement for working for the church is understanding that we cannot give what we do not have. And if we are supposed to be giving a uniquely Catholic product, we can't give that if we're not trying to live a uniquely Catholic life. So people who work for the church have to embrace their own conversion first and foremost. So on a personal level, so that the institutional goals and the management goals can be met, on an individual level, we have to, as people working for the church, embrace first and foremost our own conversion first. That we are bringing a uniquely Catholic perspective to our work that is gained through our participation in the life of the church.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think a lot of times it's very important to not only bring that forward, but then when you encounter duplicity, to not let it fester within yourself, and to refocus yourself again back towards Christ and towards prayer, and let Him rejuvenate you, because you're like, okay, now I'm worn down. I don't know who to trust. I don't know what to believe. Let's not, again, coming back to what I said, what was told to me at my first, job working for the church. Don't lose your faith
Yeah.
working for the church. If it comes between losing your faith and and keeping or not keeping a job, will go lose your faith, because the job is much less important than your personal faith. But as you're talking, Zach, I also feel like, if you're embracing that, if you're trying to embrace it as an institution, even a real simple way, which admittedly haven't really seen, other than, when you're looking for new employment, when you're looking to hire new employees, a lot of times I've seen this where it says, must be a practicing Catholic in the job description, but that's really all the detail
Yep.
that is usually given, and that's really, there's almost never follow up. I know when I've taken jobs, I'm always like, hey, this is how I'm Catholic, and I want to prove to the employer that this is how I'm Catholic. But I almost wonder and think if it would be beneficial for charities, parishes, people, of faith who want to promote this culture of integrity and Catholicity within the organization, to take it one step further and, send a survey, or when they come in for a job, hey, can you fill out this questionnaire, or hey, when you sign on, you're also going to sign this
Yeah.
pledge that you're going to, kind of, uphold
Yeah.
the teachings of the church within, not only within your work, but within your, personal life, and anything, especially on public display, um, social media, things of that nature. I mean, that would go a long, long way, if we just took that small extra step within our organizations to, hire people, and kind of, put the pen to the paper and have them sign on to that pledge of integrity, and pledge of morality within the church.
Well, and I'll tell you, anytime I've been a part of a hiring committee that is looking at new potential employees, there are two questions always ask, and I ask them together. What are areas of the faith with which you struggle? And then how do you personally deal with that struggle? And that tells us a lot, because there's always going to be parts of our faith that we struggle with, because we embrace Catholicism as a lifelong struggle, because we're not perfect. But more important than finding out what somebody struggles with is how they're dealing with it. And if they're dealing with it by, well, I figure if I go to work for the church, I can help change the teaching from the inside. That is an incorrect answer. We are allowed to dissent. We are permitted to dissent so long as we are searching truth for the sake of truth, that we understand that it's a continued search, that we don't just make up our mind and quit investigating, and that we do not lead others astray in our dissension. So we're allowed to struggle. Mother Church says you're going to struggle. You're allowed to. Don't think of yourself as a bad Catholic simply because you struggle. But the second part of that answer, how do you deal with it? If it's a change from the inside, it's going to be a bad employee, because that's going their whole position, everything around them is going to be centered on a necessarily duplicitous environment, because they're coming in to try to make those changes. But if you find someone who says, so what I do is I've been studying, and I've been reading more, and I've been looking at the church fathers, and I've been looking at scholars, and I've been praying for the Holy Spirit to give me the guidance to either be open to the conversion of my own understanding, or a way to have a piece of understanding that, even though I may not agree or I struggle with it, that when in my absence of leading other people astray by telling everybody that the church is wrong, and by making it a private, personal endeavor, a study, that I can kind of marry my disbelief or my frustration with a certain belief of the church with still being a good disciple, because I'm still working on it. I'm requiring the church to give me good answers. You can come back and say the church, in her 2,000 years of wisdom, can give really good answers to questions if you're open to asking the questions. So
Right.
continue that conversation, continue that conversion. But those, you can deal, two people can struggle with the same aspect of their faith, but go about how they deal with that struggle so differently that one will be an excellent candidate for position and one would be a terrible candidate for
Mm-hmm.
position. But
Mm-hmm.
you don't know if you don't ask. And utilizing those moments in the interview process is absolutely necessary, not only to distinguish whether or not they have the education and the professional skills, but they are the type of person who takes enough care in their spiritual life that they are going to be a good candidate who understands the necessity of conversion in their own life first and foremost. And
Right.
I will say, I'll
Yep.
end with this, sort of my take on employment. If you and erasing duplicity in the church, if you work for the church in any capacity at all, if you're the Catholic school librarian, if you're the principal, if you're the janitor, if you're the groundskeeper, if you're the pastor of the parish, if you're the head of if you're the DRE, if you're working HR, it does not matter. You should have a spiritual director. Period. End. Full stop. If you work in the church, you should have a spiritual director, because spiritual warfare is a real thing, and duplicity squeaks in when we lose sight of the goal of the whole of the institution for our own personal delights in the moment. When we lose sight of the whole for the me, when he decreases so that I can increase, nothing is going to come. Nothing good will come of it. But when we are willing to sit back and recognize our own brokenness, but the ability for us to still perform a job when we embrace the brokenness and strive to do better, we have a much better product. But the only way we can really do that is to have someone else to help us along that path. When you go to work for the church, you are instantly put on the front lines of that spiritual battle. So if you're going to work for the church, get a spiritual director
Mm-hmm.
so that you personally can grow, but you also don't detract by creating a scandalous environment from the work of the whole institution.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Great point. And, you definitely, yeah, working for the church, whether you know it or not or like it or not, you've got a target on your back, and that doesn't mean give up and don't do it. I mean, it's the most important work that can be done out there is, promoting the mission of the church. But to Zach's point, absolutely, arm yourself with good spiritual director, good devotional practices, and I think at the end of the day too, the last thing I really want to input here is that we're all human and we're all going to fall and fail, and we're all to some extent or another going to be guilty of duplicity ourselves, and when that happens, just to be humble, admit our faults, be as honest as we can, go to confession, obviously, but it's going to go a long, long way, to be honest, to be humble, yourself, and then it's going to help regain that trust with your employees, with outside organizations, with parishioners, donors, and we're all in the same boat together, and we do our best to fight duplicity in the church when we see it, but then also admit when we're wrong, and move on and grow from it. And I think if we embrace those tenets, and really just stick to again a good personal integrity, on and off the field, then we're going to be set for success in our personal lives and also within the organizations that we work.
All right, and that will end our podcast today on the topic of duplicity. Tom, thanks again for being here and being kind of my counterpart in this venture. The best part of my week is when we do these podcasts together.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons and share with others. Please support us on Patreon. You're listening to Serious Catholic Leadership at Sirius.fm.